My name is Adrian Nantchev, and this channel is all about helping you become a remarkable entrepreneur. So that's why I started this podcast, to bring you people from all over the world, whether entrepreneurs or not, to share with you their stories, their journey, who they are, and their inspiration. Today I have with me Ben Cooper, all the way from, I don't know, around the corner maybe, from Wolverhampton, the UK.
Yeah.
Please, Ben, tell the world, who are you, what is your story, and why are you doing what you're doing?
Right, so I'm Ben Cooper, animal rights activist, vegan advocate, musician, currently starting up a clothing line as well. I'm an animal rights activist because I went vegan probably coming up to about a year and a half ago now. I got involved with activism pretty much straight away after I went vegan. And it was mainly through seeing like videos on YouTube and stuff about the cruel practices that happen within the animal agriculture industry. And I just found it all completely abhorrent. And I no longer wanted to participate in it anymore. And I'm the sort of person who, if I see an injustice, I sort of want to do all that I can to stop that injustice. So that's why I got involved in animal rights activism as well.
That's very noble and sounds very interesting. And you say a year and a half ago. Can you tell me what the thought process was, or what the story was, or what was going in your mind to go into veganism?
Yeah, so basically, I was watching these two guys on YouTube called the Hodge Twins, quite well known within like the bodybuilding community and like the comedians as well. And I was watching a video saying how they went vegetarian. And I've been watching them for years and stuff, and like because they were bodybuilders, like they were typically like heavy meat eaters as well, because like people associate bodybuilding with high meat intake and stuff. So it was like quite surprising the fact that they decided to go vegetarian. So I was like, I'll click on this video, see what's happening. And basically they showed some footage, I assume, which was in America, of a factory pig farm. And, the conditions that the pigs were living in was absolutely horrible. They were basically saying how upset they were because of this, and they were like, right, we're going vegetarian. I thought, cool, man. That, that's a good thing to do. But, like, I never made the decision to go vegetarian after seeing that video. It was but that was like the first seed planted in my head. Fast forward to a few months later, I see a guy on YouTube called Vegan Gains. He's quite well known in lots of different communities, mainly because he's sort of a very controversial figure, sort of skeptic, atheist, sort of anti-feminist. So he does loads of videos and everything. Anyway, I discovered him, and he was doing a video. I think he was just talking to someone about veganism and stuff, and he mentioned about the dairy industry, and he said something along the lines of like calves being taken away from their mother and stuff like that, and then being like forcibly impregnated or something. I was like, what's that all about? But at this moment in time, I was definitely like sort of thinking about vegetarianism, but I didn't really get the whole sort of dairy thing, so I sort of ignored it. Fast forward a little bit later, I was watching a video of this band that I really love called Architects. They're like a metal band, and they were saying in this interview that they're all vegan as well. And I thought, that's crazy, man. Like, they can go all around the world, tour like in random countries and stuff, and still manage to like afford and still manage to get all the nutrients to be on a vegan diet and everything. So I thought, you know what, these guys are cool. I respect them. I feel like it's the right thing to do. I'm lactose intolerant anyway. I'm not really bothered about eggs. So I was like, you know what, tomorrow I'm going vegan. And after that, I actually started to research into the reason why people were vegan and not just vegetarian. And I saw like actually what happens in the dairy industry and what happens in the egg industry. And I quickly discovered that the dairy and egg industry are way worse treating animals than the meat industry, and the dairy industry is the meat industry as well. So yeah. It's a bit long.
Yeah, that's all right. That's all right. There's plenty to talk about. Please, could you tell me what was the conversation like as you're talking to your friends or family when you decided you're going to go vegan? Could you, what was the thought process? What was their reactions? Could you guide us through it,
please? So, not the best reaction, let's say. So, on the day when I decided to go vegan, I was with my girlfriend, and coincidentally, on that day, we actually happened to go to a zoo, which is something that I'm now actually morally opposed to. But because it was the first day that I decided to go vegan, it was sort of like, I'd just go to the zoo, like, because those were my plans pre-vegan, if you know what I mean. So yeah, we went to the zoo and stuff, and like, she had fish and chips in the canteen there, and like, she knows how much I like to eat, like, stuff like that, like fish and chips, and I like to eat a lot of food. And like, I was like, nah, I'm alright, thanks, I'll just eat the chips or something. She thought that was a bit weird. So I thought, we went home, and I thought, I'm going to tell her. So I told her, like, I'm going vegan. And she was like completely like baffled by the whole idea. She couldn't really believe it. It was, a pretty sort of negative reaction, but more just from the shock of it. Just because I think in the past, I can't really remember doing this, but I think in the past I sort of took the mickey out of vegans and stuff, so she was quite surprised that I was going vegan as well. So yeah, but once we actually started to talk about it, she completely understands. Like, I showed her a film called Earthlings, which you can watch on YouTube. It was made in about 2005, I think. And it basically explores like all the ways in which we exploit animals, from like the leather industry to the meat industry to the fur industry, all basically the whole animal agriculture sort of spectrum. So yeah, and then because I lived with my mom at the time, I told her that I was going vegan as well, and it was the similar sort of reaction, like, what are we going to eat? Like, why aren't you just going vegetarian? Why are you going vegan? Blah, 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 blah. But then not long after I went vegan, and like, I started cooking food for her because, just to make it easier, she actually realised how much she loves vegan food. So, it was initial negative reactions, but everyone sort of, come round to the idea quite quickly, like, and, are on board with it.
Yeah, I'm just curious, because you mentioned the lactose intolerance.
Yeah.
I remember hearing, this is what intrigued me in it ages ago, is that milk isn't designed for humans. Milk from a cow is designed for a calf. It's designed to get a 10 kilogram calf into 200 kilograms as soon as possible. And when you continue along that kind of reasoning, it's almost like a crime against nature to steal the milk from one animal and consume it. And denature it and other cooking it and pasteurization. It seems a bit quite illogical and irrational, and also
it is a bit strange. It is a bit strange because it's like we wouldn't drink like chimpanzee milk or dog milk or giraffe milk or cat milk or something. Yet for some reason we drink cow's milk, and like a human mother, her breast milk is intended for a child. Same with a dog; it's intended for a puppy. Same with a pig. Same with, whatever mammal. But for some reason, we've got it in our heads that cow's milk is intended for humans, and it isn't.
Yeah, and at the same time, the mother stops breastfeeding after, I don't know how long. I really don't know how long, but we stopped breastfeeding.
Yeah, it's usually once it's a few months into a pregnancy, she'll start producing breast milk. And then, of course, after she's given birth, she'll also carry on producing milk.
And and this documentary Earthlings, I've heard that but not seen it. I've seen What the Health and Cowspiracy.
Yeah.
Have you heard at all of this book called The Vegetarian Myth? I can't remember who the author is.
Something very funny. I was actually watching a video about a guy. He's on YouTube. He's called Mike the Vegan. Mike spells in like short for microphone. And he was doing a video, and I was watching it earlier on, where he actually debunked that book. Because even though it's called The Vegetarian Myth, it's actually focused on veganism, but I don't really understand why. But yeah. So yeah.
Oh, okay. I'm just curious if you heard about it at least. I
Yeah,
have
yeah.
heard about it.
Just today, I heard about it. So yeah.
Mm, that's all right. And these vegan games, this channel, I'm not familiar with that. I've heard of a channel called Vegan Geezer. Some
Yeah,
character,
yeah,
some character down south with his family doing a few things.
yeah.
Uh, he did a video last year with Veganuary.
Yes, yeah, yeah.
So that's coming up, and that's an interesting little thing. But yes, I've heard about that, and yeah, that's my reasoning behind it. That milk is not designed for us, so why would we consume it? And it's like, well, there's more to this than meets the eye. That little bit of curiosity leads to
Exactly.
all the answers of the questions and
Yeah.
queries. So you mentioned earlier that dairy is worse than the meat industry, and this kind of goes to the animal rights bit, animal rights activism. Could you please elaborate in
Yeah,
what
sure.
way the dairy is worse than meat?
So in the dairy industry, like we just discussed, the cow only produces milk when she's pregnant. So what happens in the dairy industry? A farmer will manually masturbate a bull. Usually like manually, or maybe with like using a bit of machinery as well. And he'll extract the semen from the bull. He'll then use a metal rod, insert it into the cow's vagina. He'll also shove his hand into the cow's anus. Basically, sort of there's two reasons for that. I think it stimulates her, and it also gets a uterus in the right position or something. But yeah, so basically, a cow is forcibly impregnated. Then after she's given birth, if the cow is male, he'll be taken away from the mother, and after a few days, usually, sometimes a few weeks, but usually after a few days, he'll either be shot in the head, or if it's hang on, yeah, sorry, my phone was just messing up then.
Right.
And if it's after a few weeks, he'll be slaughtered for veal. And with a female calf, she'll basically grow up and go through the same sort of cycle of like repeated impregnations, getting the children taken away from her. She'll have the same fate as a mother basically. And then after a few years, once the cow is like exhausted from being forcibly impregnated and having the children take away from her time and time again, she'll just be slaughtered after she's a few years old. I think it's usually about 6 years old, whereas cows naturally live up to 20 to 25 years if we allowed them to.
Yeah. I also heard that chickens, they naturally only have something like 15 to 20 eggs a year rather than every day or every week.
Yeah. And it's I think around about 20. And but like in the egg industry, chickens will produce up to excess of, I think it was something like 300 eggs a year, something like absurd. I mean, that might be it might be slightly less than that, but it's in the hundreds anyway. And so basically, like when a chicken produces an egg, it nutrients are required to produce that egg, especially like the shell, like the shell's made out of calcium basically. So like these chickens will be like producing all these eggs because they're being sort of selectively bred and genetically modified to produce like excessive amount of eggs. And all this time their bones are getting more and more brittle because like the nutrients are just, it's just going straight into the eggs, and they don't even have a chance, and the bones are breaking and they're crippled, and because of the conditions they're living in, disease ridden, and it's all a mess. It's horrible. Horrible industry.
Yeah, I also remember once, years ago, a decade ago, once asking someone, what is an egg exactly? And they said it's a barren egg. And it's like, I didn't fully understand that. And now I realise, looking, like in hindsight, it's like that is a chicken's period, essentially.
Yeah, basically, yeah. That's sort of a slight joke we have, like when we're sort of advocating like veganism and stuff. We say, people think it's weird that we eat like fruit and vegetables and like tofu and whatever, and then people think it's completely normal to eat like a chicken's period and drink cow's breast milk.
Mm.
Yeah.
And similarly with the veal, I remember also that for a certain period of time, they're starved of vitamin A or iron. I'm pretty sure it's vitamin A, and
Yeah,
then they're turned into veal.
yeah, because so something that I missed out. Yeah, usually if the cow, the calf is like destined for like slaughter,
Mm.
basically he'll be kept in like what's known as like a veal crate for a few weeks. And the reason why he's kept in a crate and he's like his movements restricted, either like he's sort of chained down or he's just kept in a really small confined space, it's so that the meat is quite tender after they kill the animal, so that it doesn't develop like firmer muscles like it would naturally if it was like, you know, running around with its mother and stuff. So it's sort of kept staying still, so the muscle tissue stays soft. And I think like the reason why they're deprived of certain nutrients is for that same reason as well.
Hmm. And also similarly, I remember also hearing that gelatine used for things like jelly beans and
Yeah,
other such confectionery is from boiled pig bones. And it's
yeah, yeah,
when I first heard that like 6 odd years ago, it was like that doesn't sound very appetizing.
yeah. That's basically what it is, and it's sort of what do you call it, the cartilage as well,
Mm.
within the joints of on the bones, and just the nasty stuff that you wouldn't eat unless it was covered in sugar in Haribo format.
Yes, exactly. Yeah, exactly. So, please, with regards to animal rights activism, what are you doing now about it? What activities or what conferences or what are you up to in that field?
It's sort of changed over time. It's always sort of been advocacy based. So I say there's vegan advocacy, and then there's animal rights activism, and oftentimes like the lines can be blurred between those two things, but they are sort of separate things. And I've always like leaned more towards vegan advocacy because I think it's best like to sort of, if you're going to change like a demand in a certain thing, because that is the only reason why, you know, the meat industry exists and like the dairy industry exists, is because there's a demand. So I think like if you can get to the, you know, the customer first and sort of, you know, show them the footage and talk to them and tell them how it's like better for animals, better for your health, better for the planet, that's like a good way to sort of, you know, bring down the demand for meat. And then eventually, like, you know, the goal is to sort of reach like a vegan world essentially. So yeah, it's mainly just like what we call like outreach and stuff. So it's where like a few of us will just go out like in Birmingham city centre, wherever we happen to be, and just like sort of hand out leaflets, like informative leaflets, talk to people. Usually it's in the context of what's called a Cube of Truth, which is a sort of event which has been made by an organisation called Anonymous for the Voiceless. So it's sort of like a sister group to like, you know, like the normal Anonymous. And yeah, so for like animal rights activism stuff. So yeah, so the Cube of Truth is basically like where some people will stand in like a cube sort of formation, like a square, and they'll have footage on their laptops, so like stuff like Earthlings and From Farm to Fridge, and a new film called Land of Hope and Glory, which is all UK based. And they'll be showing that footage, and then we'll just like, someone like me will just come along, and then they'll, you know, get people to come over and watch the footage. Or if they're already watching the footage, we'll go over and talk to them and just be like, oh, you know, have you seen footage like this before? How does it make you feel when you see stuff like this? You know, do you think it's morally justifiable that we do this to animals when, you know, we have no like necessity to do so? You know, we have no nutritional requirement to eat animals and stuff. So, you know, why are we doing this? Sort of like Socratic questioning, just sort of leading them to their own conclusion. Because, you know, we all say we're against animal cruelty, but like some of us, myself included, before I went vegan, weren't sort of living in alignment with that. So yeah, it's sort of to help people sort of make the connection, as we call it, like to see animals for what they are, which is, you know, living sentient beings that have a right to live. And, you know, so yeah, that's the sort of main sort of activism that I like to do.
You said just now that you weren't living up to that kind of idea years ago. Was that? Would you say in hindsight now that's a cognitive dissonance, where believing those things?
Yeah, completely. Yeah, because it's like, you know, we'd never dream of stabbing our dog in the throat and eating him, and you know, to the same effect, we wouldn't ever dream of stabbing a pig in the throat and eating him. Most of us, anyway, or a cow or a chicken or whatever. Yet every single day when we go to the supermarket and we purchase like a chicken or a bit of pork here and there, a bit of beef, we're essentially paying someone else to put a knife or to gas the animal. You know, we're essentially paying other people to kill animals for us, because we wouldn't be able to do it ourselves, because most people are good human beings. Yet we sort of have, like, as you say, this sort of cognitive dissonance where we go to the supermarket and we see it nice packaged up, and we don't see that, you know, that's dead muscle tissue of an animal that, you know, had an interest in living and wanted to live and had a family and, you know, had emotions and consciousness, was having its own conscious experience. And
Yes. Yeah, I want to ask a few things about that, because you said compassionate. How do you, in this Cube of Truth and this outreach program, how do you bridge the gap between some people that understand what you're talking about, the logic behind it, understand the health benefits as well, or the health side of it as well, but they have that disconnect with the compassion, or just other people in general don't really care about the animals, and they don't really sympathise with your cause. So how do you bridge that gap when you're trying to tackle the demand? When people see but not sympathise, and or not compassionate or not care about the animals?
Yeah, that's a good question. Usually well, me personally anyway, I like to sort of draw, sort of in a nice way, point out the hypocrisy of, like, you know, you'd think it was immoral for somebody to commit this act to, say, your dog or your mother or yourself, yet you think it's completely acceptable that it happens to another animal. And then we sort of get the person to sort of try to name the trait which makes that animal different to you or your dog, in order to justify putting a knife in their throat. And, you know, there is no trait which makes them different. So that's the sort of thing. And, you know, like, if it comes to the end of the conversation, the person's like, to be honest, I don't really care. Well, there's not really much of that. Like, you know, if they don't care, they don't care. But, like, you know, usually we'll try, you sort of gauge where the person's at. So say if they're, like, sort of into fitness and stuff, then you might, you know, talk about the health benefits and everything, and, you know, how, you know, meat is carcinogenic, and, you know, it's you know, saturated fat and cholesterol is bad for your health and stuff like that. And, you know that might help them make the connection to go vegan. Somebody else, it might be they don't really care about animal suffering, but they care about climate change, more like climate change route, and talk about, like, how animal agriculture is, like, the leading cause of, like, environmental degradation, stuff like that. But yeah, you sort of just got to sort of gauge where people are at.
Yeah, I agree. Interesting. Yeah, you take it from a different angle. I see perfectly. And you mentioned it also just now, carcinogenic. So some would say, okay, every year or so, there's a new article that comes out that says this is carcinogenic. Bread, water, wine, I don't know, peanut butter is carcinogenic. So as a kind of like a fail-safe, arguably everything is carcinogenic. Kind of.
Yeah, it seems so.
Yeah, but then how do you quantify, how do you explain away some people that live to age 100 or age 90 or age 80 and they've had meat all their life, for example, whether paleo diet or not, or just no particular diet? How do you explain that? Also at the same time, how do you explain where you ask, like, doctors or people in medicine in general, say, you know, what kind of stuff should I eat more of or less of to have better health, or this or that or whatever? And most people say, a diet of anything and everything will do, you know, the usual typical stuff, 5 fruit and veg, etc., etc. How do you explain that, where anything will do? And also at the same time, how do you explain how some people live long life and have eaten meat? and yet a long life. What are your thoughts?
I'd say usually the people who live to 100 and stuff, that those are like rare sort of exceptions. Like most people do, like what's the biggest killer in the West especially is heart disease, and what is directly linked to heart disease? High cholesterol. And where do you get cholesterol from? Animal products. It's sort of like that sort of thing. So yeah, there are obviously exceptions where people will live to 100, but like in sort of epidemiological studies on like vegan, vegetarian populations, vegans do come out on top above meat eaters, and sort of generally, I think it's something like vegans tend to live on average about 8 years longer than someone who eats like a omnivorous, like half plant-based, half meat-based diet sort of thing. What was the second question? Sorry.
How do you explain how some people in the medical world say it's okay to eat anything, eat 5 fruit of veg and a dairy, that triangle of food? How do you explain that away?
Well, a lot of doctors aren't actually trained that much in nutrition, which is crazy, but it's something insane. Like the average doctor will receive something like 20 hours of nutritional training, and in their whole like 5 years of like going to university and studying, medical science and everything. So yeah, the doctors really, for the most part, know just as little as the average person, and they're only going off what they were taught, like in medical school and stuff. That you need to get calcium from milk, and like you can only get protein from meat, and saturated fat is good for you, and stuff like that. So yeah, doctors don't really know for the most part any more than the average person. So yeah,
I see your point. Is there anything particularly you can point us to defend that or to prove that?
Well, yeah, you can look in, to sort of the fact that doctors do only receive like 20 hours of medical nutrition training. But yeah, like there's sort of like, if you look at like the plant-based doctors, like Michael Greger and just trying to think of some of the others. I think it's Dr. McDougall. Can't think of some of the other guys. But yeah, and the guy who is, I don't know what position, he's sort of the top guy in the American Heart Association or something. He's vegan as well. He advocates for a completely plant-based diet for, ideal, optimal heart health and stuff like that. But yeah.
Yeah, and also I'm very curious because you mentioned it. Protein. A lot of people will say, where are you going to get the protein from? But what's your counter to that? What's your argument to that? Protein?
Yeah, so all protein comes from plants originally. Only plants can take nitrogen from the atmosphere, convert them into amino acids, which are the building blocks of protein. So like whenever we eat, like say a cow, for instance, that cow originally got protein from plants, from like grass, or typically in like factory farm circumstances from like soybeans or wheat and stuff. So yeah, there's protein in all plants, even fruit. And like as long as you're getting enough calories, you're getting enough protein. No one's ever been rushed into AE like suffering from like protein deficiency. It's just unheard of. Like whereas you can get like obviously calcium deficiencies and everything. But yeah, like no one's protein deficient. Like you can get all that you need, all the essential amino acids, as long as you're eating like as long as you're not eating Oreos and goddamn drinking Coke all day. Like as long as you're eating like a whole foods plant-based diet, consisting of like rice, beans, chickpeas, vegetables, fruit, you'll be getting enough protein.
Yeah, Coca-Cola, aspartame in Diet Coke, and also it mentioned corn briefly as well. Probably got glyphosate in there, so that's a whole different story. Also, one other thing that I've discovered I learned recently with the vegan diet is that there's a lack of B12, vitamin B12. That's something that does concern me about it. So how do you go around that? Because as I remember, B12 is a lot in animals.
Yeah.
In meat. So isn't that going to cause a problem? How do you get around that?
Yeah, so basically, like B12 doesn't come from animals. B12 is found in like bacteria, which grows in soil. So, like, say if we go back at a few hundreds of thousands of years, when we were eating food, typically we was eating it out of the ground, like starches and carrots, and so we'd be naturally ingesting like the sort of dirt that would be found on those vegetables. We'd be getting enough B12 from the soil. Same with like sort of rivers as well, and like ponds and stuff. Like if we were drinking out like a river or a lake and stuff, we'd be getting the B12 from that. So yeah, like the reason why like a lot of meat eaters are getting enough B12, which actually these days they aren't, is because like animals, like when they're eating off the ground, they'll be like sort of ingesting like a little bit of soil here and there. They'll be getting the B12. Also, farmers will supplement B12 into the animal's diet. So then, like most meat eaters will be eating the muscle tissue of the animal, and they'll be getting the B12 from that. So the way vegans get B12 is just a supplement. You can go to Holland and Barrett's and just buy like I can't remember, like 100 B12 capsules for like a few quid, and there's your B12.
But I also heard yeast. Yeast was good, wasn't it?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we was talking about that the other day, weren't we? Marmite, I think it was. Yeah, I think it's because like yeast is sort of like and there's also certain my mate gave me these leaves the other day to make like some herbal tea. I think he said some of the leaves in this have like naturally occurring B12 in them as well, which is it's an interesting little thing.
Are those bay leaves at all? Bay leaves?
I'm not even sure. I think he said. I don't even know. He's like into his herbs and stuff, so he finds like some crazy herbs and that. So like someone could like look at these and tell me. I have no idea.
That's all right. That's all right. But as we slowly wrap up this podcast, though, Ben, please tell me what you're working on now. And what is next for you?
Okay, so like my main sort of thing at the moment is my music, because I'm a music producer as well. Like I've been doing that since I was like 15, so like a kid really. So yeah, like I'm sort of just working on music at the moment. Not anything major and stuff. I used to be in a band and that, but we sort of broke up and stuff. But yeah, so nothing like major and that, just like dabbling in a few things. But what's coming up next is I'm about to launch my clothing line, which is vegan, animal rights based clothing line, sort of with a sort of different twist to a lot of animal rights clothing lines, because usually it's sort of more statement wear, I think it's called, or like sort of picket sign style, where it's just like words, like it's like don't eat animals, they're my friends, stuff like that, like sort of like generic stuff. Whereas like I'm sort of taking a little twist on it and sort of making it more like fashion based, but also still have that animal rights vegan message sort of embedded within that. So like I like to think of it as being sort of animal rights / vegan streetwear. So it's sort of like fashionable as well as being ethical.
Interesting streetwear. That's going to be an interesting little combination.
Yeah.
And lastly, what phrase would you put on a billboard for the world to see?
That's a good one. It's a tough one.
All right, you still there?
Hmm.
Oh, okay.
I was about to say something there. Animals are sentient, conscious beings that have the same fundamental value. Therefore, we shouldn't eat them.
Could you say that again, please? There's a bit of connection error then. Animals,
Yeah,
sentient...
no. I think I'm just going to have to make it up as we go along again. What was it now? Animals, sentient, conscious beings that have the same fundamental right to live as we do. Therefore, we should stop eating them.
Animals, sentient, conscious beings that have the same fundamental right to exist or to live as we do. Therefore, we should stop eating them.
Something like that, yeah.
Interesting. Very, very good. Very, very, very noble. And lastly, before we wrap up, what is the best way for the audience to get in touch with you?
Just add me on Facebook, really. I probably will. I'm sort of thinking about starting a YouTube channel soon, just to start putting, promoting my clothing line, as well as like promoting like the vegan message and stuff, doing just like general videos and stuff. But yeah, just Ben Cooper. If you type in Ben Cooper and then in brackets Christian, Kristien, that's sort of like my artist music name. So yeah, type that in on Facebook, add me on there, and feel free to chat anytime.
Yeah, cool. I'll add that link in the show notes below. But
Awesome.
Ben, it was great talking to you.
You too, man.
And ladies and gentlemen at home, ladies and gentlemen, if you haven't already, click on the subscribe button below and press the bell notification right next to it for the latest uploads. You see, because this channel is all about helping you become a remarkable entrepreneur. Again, that's why I have this podcast, to share stories and inspiration from people all over the world doing remarkable things with their life. Because you see that, when you go out there in the world, that is what it's all about, to do something remarkable with it. So in the meantime, click on the subscribe button, press the bell notification right next to it for the latest upload. How cool is that?
Yeah, that's cool, man.
Yeah, it's very cool.